Hi, good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I am so psyched to welcome you to tonight's conversation between Professor Angela Duckworth and Dr. Dana Suskind. Sorry, I had a typo in my notes, sorry. Professor Angela Duckworth and Dr. Dana Suskind, there we go. FAN is a nonprofit organization that presents a high-quality speaker series offered free to the public on a wide variety of topics, including human development, mental health, education, and social justice, among others. We have over 175 videos of past events archived on our website and our YouTube channel, so please be sure to explore. And now for some introductions. We are beyond thrilled to welcome back one of our heroes, Dr. Dana Suskind, the founder and co-director of the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health, director of the Pediatric Cochlear Implant Program, and professor of surgery in pediatrics at the University of Chicago. Recognized as a national thought leader in early language development, Dr. Suskind has dedicated her research and clinical life to optimizing foundational brain development and preventing early cognitive disparities and their lifelong impact. She is the best-selling author of the 2015 book, 30 Million Words, Building a Child's Brain, and the newly released Parent Nation, Unlocking Every Child's Potential, Fulfilling Society's Promise. We hosted Dana in 2015 for a few events in conjunction with the launch of 30 Million Words. She is spectacular. And who better to interview Dana than another fan favorite, longtime fan favorite, Professor Angela Duckworth, the founder and CEO of Character Lab, a nonprofit whose mission is to advance scientific insights that help kids thrive. She is the Rosalie and Egbert Chang Professor at the University of Pennsylvania, the faculty co-director at Behavior Change for Good, and faculty co-director of Wharton People Analytics. And they both have like 97 more paragraphs of resumes. She is also co-host with Stephen Dubner of the podcast No Stupid Questions. Her 2013 TED Talk is over 26 million views, and her first book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, is a #1 New York Times bestseller. Professor Duckworth has appeared for FAN in 2012 and 2016, and we are lucky to have her engagement with our work. And now let's welcome Dana Suskind and Angela Duckworth.
Thank you so much, Lonnie. You know that I'm a super fan of FAN, and so is Dana. Dana, it's good to see you.
It's great to see you.
I'm very excited for this conversation. And as you know, I think the best way to start any conversation is with a personal story. And I'm going to ask this question, and I hope you answer it in as personal terms as you can. You're a doctor, you're a surgeon, you're a pediatric surgeon. Why is somebody like you with that background, how did you get so interested in public policy? And that will get us, I think, into Parent Nation.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for being here. You know, it is true. I am a pediatric physician, a pediatric surgeon, in fact, and I really entered the profession because I thought I could change lives, one child at a time. By implanting them with a cochlear implant for children born deaf, I give them access to sound, to hearing, and to spoken language. But the truth is, early in my practice, I started noticing profound differences in their outcomes after surgery. Some of them would be excelling developmentally and others not at all. Some learning how to talk, others not. The ability to hear, it turned out, didn't always unlock their full capacity to learn and thrive intellectually. It was an incredibly painful difference to see. And, you know, when you take the Hippocratic oath in medicine, I always say your responsibility to your patients doesn't end, when the surgery ends or where your clinic room visit ends. It really ends when your patients do well. And so really compelled to understand why these differences were happening between my patients and how, more importantly, what I could do to better help them. I began this journey far outside the operating room and really into the world of social sciences. And if you had asked me, in 2010, would I be here with you talking about public policy and the need to, reorient our society around children and families, I would have never believed it. But along my journey, after understanding how important the early years and the power of parents was for healthy development for all children, not just children with hearing loss, I started a program, a center, which was initially called the 30 Million Words Initiative, but now it's called the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health at the University of Chicago. we built the center with this idea that by allowing parents and caregivers to understand the power of their language to build their children's brains and the importance of the first 3 to 5 years of life, that alone would make the difference. And in fact, at that time, I wrote a book back in 2015, 30 million words, Building a Child's Brain. And I thought that the knowledge would be adequate enough. And of course, parents make a huge difference in their children's lives. But as I was working with more and more families and just seeing barrier after barrier being put in their way, the larger realities of, work constraints, economic stressors, discrimination, and realizing that those things mattered as much as the talk and interaction that goes to building children's brains, I realized, for me to really make good on that Hippocratic oath and allow all my patients and really all children in this country to thrive, I would need to start exploring the world of public policy, which is, I guess, why I'm here today in the origins of the book, Parent Nation.
So in a way, I hear this journey as like, well, first you want to help kids one kid at a time. Then you realize, differences in language in the first 3 to 5 years of life. And then you're sort of going more and more upstream. It sounds to me, I do want to ask for some parents maybe who are less familiar with 30 million words and like where that phrase comes from, if you could annotate that for all of us.
Absolutely. So in my own journey in trying to understand the differences in my patients' outcomes, I actually, believe it or not, audited a child development class at the University of Chicago, which is probably as challenging as at the University of Pennsylvania. And there I learned the science of human development. And one of the first studies I learned about from Susan Levine was a study that was done some 40 years ago that basically followed a number of kids in Kansas City and in trying to understand what went into allowing children to thrive. And basically this study showed that by the end of the age of 3, some children, often children in poverty, will have heard 30 million fewer words than other children. And that predicted not just vocabulary differences, but test scores and sort of trajectories. I do want to say that it was a powerful study to make me sort of start the journey. It has many issues that have come up since that time, but it was a powerful enough sort of hook to get a surgeon out of the operating room that at the end of the day, early language environments, the power of parents' talk and interaction literally builds a child's brain. And that is sort of the underlying sort of focus of all of my work.
And if you want to start from then your earlier book, right? And that was 30 million words. So now we have Parent Nation. Can you say more about why you decided to write this book and what is different about what this book introduces us to than what you had already covered in your prior book?
Yeah. So, the first book, 30 million words, really used the neuroscience to understand at an individual level what children need to thrive, what children need for healthy brain development, and what individuals, often parents and caregivers, can provide to optimize healthy brain development. And so I sort of look at this next book as, if we know all of this to be true, all of this neuroscience of healthy brain development and what parents need and what children need, what does a society look like that is really aligned with this brain science that allows parents to parent and build their children's brain? At some level, honestly, Angela, this is almost a love letter to parents, and sort of the result of my incredulousness, really frustration with seeing just how parents are treated in this country. Parents don't just contribute to society. In truth, they create it. They are, as all of us, we're, raising the next generation of teachers, students, doctors, professors, librarians, construction workers. And really, parents are doing this incredible labor. But over and over again, with the parents that I met and work with at the university through the center, and then the broader population of parents that I've spoken to, their dreams and values didn't line up with the choices that they could make. We talk a big game in this country about parental choice, but I would argue that we really don't give parents choices, right?
Real choices.
real choices, right? If they, if parents, I've spoke to many number of mothers who, their dream was to stay home and raise their children. One of them, came from the evangelical community, but wasn't able to because, her husband, who was a student teacher, didn't have health insurance or a living wage. And juxtaposed to that was a woman, Talia, who actually you'll identify with, has a brilliant PhD in psychology, who had a great postdoctoral fellowship here at the U of C. And had to step back because she couldn't afford childcare. Her husband and her salary wouldn't cover childcare. It was more than a mortgage. And so she felt, as she said, she felt like she was failing in all parts of her life and had to step back. So that's the origins of the book.
And let's get into then the book. And I want to ask an unfair question, which is it possible for you to give me the bottom line thesis of the book? And I know there's so much in the book, but it's actually very well organized. And in particular, if you want to talk about the 3 F's, but however you want to, give me the big picture of what Parent Nation is really about.
Yeah, I guess, at the end of the day, before I get into the 3 F's, the bottom line thesis is that I hope that parents, I hope that everyone in society, that parents should not have to go it alone when raising children. Now, only parents parent their children, but the fact of the matter is that society, community, policy, employers are all there should be all there to support parents so that they have the freedom to parent as they choose. And most importantly, to give all children the ability to reach the promise of their promise, which is really the subtitle of the book. And so I guess that is the bottom line thesis of the book. But the next line thesis is, we know so much in this country, in this world we have the scientific evidence, we have the economic case, we have the general consensus. I don't care what people say. People on all sides of the aisle believe that we should be allowing parental choice and that American parents deserve more societal support. What we don't have is sort of the public and political will to hold people accountable that they should be getting more support. So I guess, going to the 3 F's that I know you know about is I hope that parents come together, really everyone comes together and, to find community, to forge collective identity and fight for change, in their communities and in our country so that we make good on the idea of family values and really make families feel valued.
And do you want to double click just for a moment on, what these 3 things are? So I think you're saying, look, there is an urgent need for us to provide more support to parents. I think you're right. I hope you're right that is a bipartisan issue. But then you want to say, look, if there is a second line thesis, let me give you some broad strategic. So can you unpack then a little bit more those 3 F's? And I think you started with finding community.
Absolutely. I spent hundreds of hours talking to parents from all different backgrounds. I really want to emphasize that this book, as you know, is driven by powerful stories of parents who, at the end of the day, all they wanted, was to give their children the opportunity for the best start in life. And I heard over and over again that so many parents, felt like this was a lonely struggle. And I never heard parents criticizing each other. I spoke to all different racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, political, religious backgrounds. And I never heard parents criticizing each other. They desired more community. I feel like COVID-19 has really shined a light that none of us parent alone and that we are stronger together. So I want people to be able to find community, find community, and then forge collective identity. So often in this country, we hear about individuals identifying by identities other than parents, right? Most of us are parents, but and we know all the different identities, but I heard time and time again, this unifying theme of parental love. Let's face it, parents will go to the ends of the earth despite all barriers for their children. And if we can sort of harness that and really find that common love for our children and for our future, and that we are all parents, gosh, we would really be able to move this country forward. And then fighting for change. It sounds like a fight, but really what it is that finally allowing this country to actualize what we have said from the very beginning. We are an amazing country. We are about the strong human capital. And, really it's not just policies, it's social norms, it's employers coming together and actually centering on the future. Children are our future. It sounds like a platitude, but it is very true. So those 3 F's, if we could find a way, I think we could really move this country forward.
I am, Dana, going to ask you a couple of really specific questions about policies that are, being debated right now. And I also want to talk about the workplace. But before I do, I want to actually change pace a little bit and go back to the personal. You are not only a pediatric surgeon, you are a mother. And I know you love your children, but I just wanted to know, at a personal level, whatever you want to share about how you've raised your own children and what you've seen in the lives of your children as it relates to Parent Nation.
Yeah. So I am the mother, mother to 3 biologic children and 5 stepchildren. I am the proud mother of 8 children. And yes, it can be a little bit crazy. COVID-19 felt like more
like a reality
camp.
show ready to be filmed.
I know, it's like the Brady Bunch on steroids, but it is so amazing. And there is nothing that I love more than my children and my family. And, but I can tell you that, back in 2012, I'll share a little bit since it's in the book. And I lost my first husband. Now I'm going to cry, excuse me. I lost my first husband who drowned in Lake Michigan. Oh, goodness. As much as I've talked about it, I still get choked up. Who drowned in Lake Michigan, saving 2 children. And, I was left alone, a single mom with 3 young children. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? My life was crumbling. And, as a parent, no matter what, at the end of the day, it's like, how am I going to give my children the lives that they were supposed to have? And it was amazing. I mean, all of a sudden I was enveloped, right, by my community, by my employer, by my city. And I say, that I lost my faith in serendipity at that moment in time, but I gained my faith in humanity. And the truth of the matter is, even though right now we feel like a very divided, it feels uncomfortable. I know at the end of the day that there is so goodness in all parts of our country. And I realized that all families deserve this. All family, life has lots of ups and downs, and certainly the pandemic has shown us how difficult it can be. But we are stronger together. And in some ways, I don't want it to be left to serendipity that when tragedy strikes, that you have to just be lucky enough. I mean, I was so lucky. I mean, my children still talk about the, 3 months of food that came 3 times a day. It was ridiculous. But you know what? We need to not leave it up to chance. We need to have the systems in place so that all families who all love their children should be able to have that type of support. So.
Now let's go back to the book, and I want you to tell me something in the course of the extensive research. And I just, as a social scientist, I want to applaud you for, I think, a masterful but accessible synthesis of the most important research that parents and anybody who cares about kids should know. I wanted to ask you, in the course of that research, did anything surprise you? Is there anything that was particularly, against your intuitions, or was it all stuff that, given your past work, you could have predicted?
It really, I guess, probably the most surprising thing is, as I mentioned, I spoke to parents from all different backgrounds, and they all, as I mentioned, they were all struggling at some level. I mean, certainly families living in poverty, it was unimaginable, but really all families were struggling. But what was really interesting is they all thought they were the only ones struggling. I think because we've convinced people that parenting should be a go it alone thing, that we've internalized this idea when things are really hard. In some ways, it's like on us, like we're failing. And the truth is that, they thought that parents had something else, other parents had something figured out, without realizing that, with the vacuum of societal support, so many parents are struggling. I mean, look, when childcare costs the amount of a college tuition or mortgage, except for the top 1%, you're going to struggle. When 1 in 4 mothers go back to work because we have no paid parental leave after giving birth to a child just 2 weeks ago, like, you're going to struggle. And, I would love for people to realize that they're not alone.
Do you think,
so I guess
that's the title of the book is Parent Nation. I think you're speaking most centrally to the United States and the opportunities and challenges for American parents. Do you think that kind of loneliness and the sort of isolation and the kind of like, well, I guess parenting is something you do on your own and good luck. Like, is that something that do you think is kind of Western or American in culture? I don't know if you had any thoughts about comparing.
Yeah, no. Actually, there's some really interesting research about this on several levels. There's a woman, Caitlin Collins. She's an awesome researcher at WashU, who did this really interesting qualitative study, exploring sort of this idea of maternal guilt, right? There's a lot of, we know that mothers are having really a hard time from a mental health issue with all that's going on and the lack of supports. But, there's this idea of maternal guilt, like, I'm failing in all parts of my life type of thing. And she talked to people in, Italy and other countries. And really, this idea of maternal guilt is very much a US-centric thing, because it implies that when things don't go perfectly, it's all on you and you deserve no societal support. And what's really interesting is in the sort of I think it was Norwegian countries, I may get that one wrong, they were like, what? They didn't even understand the question. It was like a foreign language, like, why would I feel guilty? I don't get it. And in Italy, where, instead they were like, why isn't society supporting me more? I mean, they wanted more help, but they weren't self-flagellating themselves.
They were not blaming themselves. They weren't thinking,
yeah, in our country,
must be me.
Yeah, we self-flagellate. So I always joke, I don't know about you, but, people say, well, gosh, how do you do it? And I say, mediocrely, or, there's no such thing as perfect parenting, right? I mean, I really do subscribe to the good enough parenting. This is not about being perfect, but our country really makes it so much harder to be a parent than it really has to be. So.
Well, I want to actually then ask this question, because you're, I think, not only giving parents things that they could think about for their own families, but really this is a call to action, sort of manifesto, if you will. So if you want to op-ed for a moment on the child tax credit or on any other contemporary legislation that's being discussed right now that, you would like people to be aware of or to rally around.
Sure. I mean, I'll mention the tax child credit very briefly, and then maybe a little bit of paid parental leave, because I just find it so striking that we are literally the only one of, I think, 38 developed nations without it. And there's such a strong case for it. I mean, in terms of the child credit, we know that the recent 1-year credit that allowed, I think, 60+ million families to receive monies for their young children, about approximately $3,000 a year, it lifted like 3 million plus children out of poverty. It stabilized people's lives, and people really, despite what people talked about, the research really showed, they spent money, not on fun things like food and, housing and, things to sort of keep their lives stable. And a study out of Colombia really showed that even though everybody was up in arms like, oh, this costs so much, which like when you just look at the numbers, it is a lot, but actually their study showed that you get a tenfold return on investment. So every dollar that was invested in the tax credit, you get a tenfold return on investment. And these are economists saying it, not a surgeon.
Not pediatric surgeon.
Listen, let me just be clear. I can tell you about the brain science and how it relates to this. I'm not a policymaker.
You're married to a pretty good economist.
I know, this one, I do get a little insight, like, what does this mean? What does this mathematical formula mean? It's sort of nice to have them around, but and you get these cost savings, and Jim Heckman, a Nobel laureate that you know as well, has really shown that, investing in the early years has a huge societal return on investment because of, impacts on long-term education, health of the individuals, decreased incarceration, et cetera. But so that's the child, tax credit. But as I mentioned, the paid leave, it blows me away that we are literally the only country without it, and only developed nation.
And since we are without it, if you could just tell us, since we don't have it, like, what are these policies like what exactly do they pay for? I'm sure there's some variation across countries, but you get, there's huge variation in terms of how much paid leave they get. The best paid leave I've heard, has, at least 6 months of leave, is gender neutral. I can't emphasize enough the importance of both, if they're both mothers and fathers in the home, for both to partake in it, because there's plenty of research showing that when dads take it, not only do the children thrive, but the gender equity at home thrives. It leads to less divorce. So there's a lot of positive attributes, and I've definitely heard that we have no mandated federal leave, but in larger corporations, there is gender neutral leave. But just because fathers can take the leave, often they don't, because of the feeling of stigma, or you're not being the ideal worker. It's about your work.
Yeah, so I want to really emphasize that all that I talk about is this is not just a policy play. This is a shifting social norms, an employer play. I mean, so this is much more than that. But yeah, so most places have it as a federally mandated issue. In our country, it's a catch as catch can, and a small percentage actually I can't pull it all of a sudden out of my head, but a small portion of individuals actually have access to it. And, as I mentioned,
just because their employer happens to have an extraordinarily, by American standards, generous parental policy.
Absolutely. So, if you work at Google, you have a very generous policy. But if you work at the millions of small businesses who would go broke if they had to support it all. And that's why, this is a market. This can't be filled completely by the marketplace, because small businesses, small businesses are the backbone of our country, right? And they are suffering too, because we don't have an infrastructure of support for families. Anyway, so I digress.
So your magic wand wish would be that there would be federal funding for paid parental leave, and that
Absolutely.
The cost would not, it wouldn't be legislation that would force employers to do it as so much as support family leave directly from the government.
Yeah, I mean, and people could pay into it. I mean, I talk in the book about, now I'm getting off topic, but the fact is that portable benefits, I mean, right now, work today looks very different than it did, 50 years ago, where you worked at Ford, you had a pension, you had a bunch of benefits, and you could take care of your family with a single job. As we know, it has changed dramatically. But one of the biggest shifts of, risk has gone from the big corporation shoulders to the fragile shoulders of the American worker. And one of the problems is that they don't have, the risk is all on them. So portable benefits that follows the individual, right? If they're a gig economy worker, allows them to weather the ups and downs of life. And Social Security is obviously a portable benefit. It goes with you, but these are the benefits that help stabilize the family to allow children to thrive. I've gotten very far off from paid leave. Sorry.
No, it's
Angela.
all good. This is your magic wand, so you get to go. And I actually think it is it is good to actually give that full context. I do want to ask you about young children, and I have a question that when I was reading your book, I was like, wow, maybe I, as somebody who specializes in teenagers, right, the psychology of adolescence, like maybe I'm too late because, so much of the evidence. So I wanted to ask you, Dana, am I too late? And what do you want to tell us about timing? Because I think a lot of parents in particular in this conversation are thinking about the particular age of their kids. So things that you want to say, to parents of very young children, parents of children who are, if it's the 6th grade, middle school, high school. But yeah, am I too late? And what else do you want to say?
You were definitely, look, I really, I answered this question a lot with my first book, 30 Million Words, because people would come, I'm like, is this too late? I'm like, no, it's not
like,
too
oh
late.
no,
First
my
of all,
child is 6.
Yeah, no. I mean, first of all, this, I mean, the neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. I mean, there's no doubt in the early years, it's the most robust, but, adolescence has another really important period of time. And
period,
yeah,
I think.
yeah. And hopefully, even at my elderly age, it's
plasticity all lifelong.
All along. It's just that in the early years when the brain is most plastic and really you're building the sort of architecture for lifelong learning is exactly when society doesn't invest, right? I'm not saying stop investing later, absolutely not. But we are losing out on a sensitive, important period of time when the children of our country's brains are literally being built from the ground up. So I guess that's the
and for
message.
parents of babies and toddlers and preschoolers, is there, and I know you addressed this also in your earlier, but do you have any advice, any parenting advice for them?
Absolutely. First I want to start off, before I give a prescription, although there's no prescription, is to give yourself grace, right? I think this moment in time in parenting, my children, our children are in college, there are different stressors, but being a parent of a young child or, even a middle school child is pretty darn tough. So give yourself grace. As I mentioned, I believe in good enough parenting. There are many times where I'm like, you would not have wanted out. It was not the most optimal, and
it was not perfect.
It was not perfect. So that's that. But, we've really at the center, which is the core of the work, have distilled a lot of the science of what it takes to build a healthy brain, especially in those early years. And there are two things. There's rich, nurturing interaction that I'll tell you about. We've distilled it down to the 3 T's, and then protection from toxic stress. So let me talk about the input part. The 3 T's are what we tell parents is like a shorthand way for building a child's brain. Tune in, talk more, take turns. What is tuning in? Tuning into your child, following your child's lead, getting down on their level and using eye contact. Then talking about what they're interested in, using rich language, talking about the past and the future. And then lastly is taking turns, viewing your child as a conversational partner from day one, even before they can talk. And those 3 T's, believe it or not, as simple as it sounds, are causing 1 million neural connections happen every second in your baby's brain. So that is the key. So,
and when you say about those 3 T's and, the tuning in, talking and then turn taking, you really do get this picture that the child's brain is developed in this dance with the parents. And that's how we're designed, right? Like we're not designed to grow up without that. Do you like the expression serve and return parenting. I guess it's supposed to be like a ball going, but
Yeah,
yeah,
sort of like if you're in tennis. Yeah, I mean, you know what I've found? I mean, you know this. I mean, there are lots of different shorthand ways of doing it, but yeah, it can be serve and return, conversational turns. You know, some of the coolest research that I really love that I love is the one out of Princeton showing the neural synchrony of babies and adults, right? When you're interacting with a baby and you're really in tune, your brain waves actually synchronize. And that has been related to, improved language, et cetera. And it's just incredible. I mean, like at some level, this is intuitive, right? I mean, people say, well, this is just proving what we've always known. Absolutely. But it's giving the heft to be able to convince those, running our country and ourselves that yes, this investing in the early years isn't just about being nice or doing the right thing. Like this is the brain development
it's
of
like
children.
literally building your child's brain. And
yeah,
my 19-year-old might say like, it gives a whole new layer of meaning to vibing, which is I think what our children need, for us to be like really, as you say, tuning in, talking, and then that turn taking. Well, let's talk about parent villages and the big shift tool. And I know you're very excited to share a little bit about that. Can you say more? And I'm guessing that in the chat, magical links might also appear. I hope.
Yeah. I mean, look, why did I write this book? I actually, after my first book, I said I was never going to write another book. And I felt compelled because
so hard.
I know, no, this is the last one. Although John keeps saying we have to write another one together. I'm like, no way. But but why did I write this book? Because I so want to see this country live up to its ideals, to support families. And what is so clear is, as I mentioned, we've got the case, we've got the economic, the scientific, we've got every case in the book. What we don't have is the public will. And so in the sort of going back to those 3 F's of finding community, forging collective identity, and fighting for change, I wanted to actualize what I would hope would come out of the book. So I want to emphasize that I am part of a larger team. Nothing of greatness, I mean, happens from one person, even though one person often gets a lot of credit. I am the reflection of many incredible people. And so myself and Heidi and Yoli and Liz and John and many others, we have built this incredible curriculum that allows groups of families, and it's not just parents, because parents are busy, grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody, concerned citizens, to come together and figure out what change that they want to see in their communities. I mean, it can be as simple as we want a lactation room, in our community center, to, I'm really interested in being connected to organizations fighting for paid family and medical leave. And it's really about shifting the narrative from it's all on me to, what, I am building our country's future and I want this society to actually support me. So that's that. And then if you go, I mean, I feel like I'm talking way too much, but within it, one of the coolest—
You're here to talk. It's good. I'm here.
We're here. I'm giving you 30 million words, Angela, in 45 minutes.
The fan audience can take it.
So the big shift tool, like I often think part of the issue is that we never really can visualize just how much is on our shoulders. So our team built this really cool tool that for the villages that you can do with by hand and write it down. But one of our medical students, the great thing about being at a university, you've got all these smart kids who want to help.
Students.
Exactly. Built this tech where parents can go through these different scenarios and sort of say, like, if my child had a doctor's appointment, but I had no more days at work, what would I do, right? And they go through all these scenarios and sort of see how much of the burden is all on them and how much is society playing a role in supporting them. So and so they go through this exercise, and invariably, the balance scale is like this. Everything is on them and society's doing nothing. And then we give them permission to reimagine what they would want society to be like, that magic wand. And I want to really point out that, when I talked to families from all different political and religious and ethnic backgrounds, and I gave them that magic wand and I removed all this political mumbo jumbo, it was amazing how similar their desires were. And so we're giving them the permission to reimagine what they want their society to look like that's aligned with their values. And let me tell you, it always comes, it's a universal, they want their kids to get a good, healthy start. So the Big Shift tool is really fun as well. So.
Okay, if it appears in the chat, great. And if not, then maybe when Lonnie takes over in just a few minutes to ask some audience questions, like I will dig it up and I will make sure that goes out as well. So Dana, what is the most controversial thing that you say in Parent Nation? As you say, in a way, what you're talking about isn't controversial because there's universal love for our children. We all want the same thing. We want a healthy early start. We want them to have the best chance. But is there anything that you would point to in the pages of this wonderful book that you would say, like, yeah, I know this is bold, but I'm going to put it out there?
Probably the most controversial thing is the idea that we can actually all come together. The truth of the matter is that people like to distort what people say, right? That in fact, that all parents love their kids from all different backgrounds, and that we can come together and find our common humanity, and that we can elevate expectations for society, and making it clear that elevation of expectations of society is not getting government in your house. Heck no, nobody wants that. That is the biggest misconception. This is not about that. This is about having the societal support so that you, as the individual parent, because only parents, I always say there are many ways to parent a child. There's only one way to build a brain, but many ways to parent a child. And through the right supports, parents can parent the way they want. So I would say that's probably one thing that, that people might question. And the second thing is this idea that really to push forward our country, I've come to realize that we need to find a way to unify our voice. And, the AARP back, 60 years ago transformed what it is to be elderly in this country. Before, they were the poorest segment of society. 50% lived below the minimum standards of decency. And through the AARP, which united people across socioeconomic, religious,
racial lines.
Everything. I mean, really, literally,
I think it's like the number one and number two highest circulation magazines, or like the AARP.
Well, let me tell you, it's 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 independent. I mean, that is across all lines. And I'm sorry, I have family members from all different backgrounds, and it's amazing how much, and they're elderly, how much they benefit, and they view this as a societal good. And I think that in some way, parents can be the same for each other. And parents, early child care providers, anybody who cares about children in this country, if we come together and find our commonality and lift it up, I think we can make change. So
I have one last question before Lonnie takes over and asks some questions from the audience, which is, I just find you, Dana, to be one of the most positive, curious, energetic, loving people. And I wonder if you might remember from your own childhood, if you can speculate, you're an N of one, but any experiences or advantages that you had when you were a little girl that might explain, you really are a wonderful person. And I know you're not going to say that you are, but at least you might share something that, tells the story of, how Dana came to be.
Well, thank you. And I feel the same, but you know what? My parents, my mom is a social worker. My dad is a pediatrician. They gave me the opportunity. They allowed me to see the beauty of humanity. I mean, literally, I think one of the greatest gifts is to be able to see the beauty in those around you, because, it's a wonderful thing. So I give my parents credit, and I blame them, because really a surgeon would be doing much better if she just stayed in the operating room. But I give my parents credit for allowing me to see the world and believe that positive change can come and that we're stronger together. So
thank you so much, Dana. This has been a fantastic conversation. I know that there are questions, and Lonnie is going to, I think, facilitate them. So while you do, yes, and I think Lonnie also chatted the link to Big Shift. So I look forward to the audience questions, and I also want to just hold up your book because this is not self-promotion, this is other promotion. And I loved every page of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Angela, thank you for a great interview with Dana. Dana, how lucky are you to have Angela? And Angela, what a great person to interview. So much depth in her research and such. I concur with your comments about her as an individual and as just the vibe. It was like that the first time I met Dana. I kind of did a low key, what I thought was probably friendly stalking of her at a speaking event that she did. I said,
I still remember.
You were very gracious to me. I think I was there because I'm a Chicago alum as well. So I think it was maybe it was a Harper lecture or something for alums. Yeah. I'm not quite sure why exactly I was there. I can't recall back that far, but just remembering being so wowed by you and thinking that the research at that time, and then just the vibe, as Angela says. So a couple things. I want to remind folks, we are doing a buy one, get one free with Dana's new book. What does that mean? That means that if you buy a copy, if you look in chat, here's Anne-Marie's going to throw in the commercial for it. If you buy a copy of Parent Nation from our bookseller, not from other booksellers, we'll just call them other booksellers. If you buy from our bookseller, the Bookstall, they will send you a receipt via email, but then they'll also send you an email with a link to come to After Hours, which is going to start at 8 o'clock tonight, 8:05 actually, with Dana. And Heidi Stevens is joining us, who has been working with you, Dana, for some time. Heidi is also a fan board member, which has really been fabulous all year. And then when you come to After Hours, we're going to go ahead and put in a link for you to fill out a form, and we're going to send you a second book. So you get 2 copies of the book. You can give one to your professor, to your neighbor, to another mom or dad, to your kid, whoever you want to give the book to. So come do that with us. So thing number 1. Thing number 2, I want to say, Angela, I have to say that I wrote down when you said, oh, I got to double click that. So now I'm going to start saying double click. I just pick things up when people say cute things. So now double click is going to enter the vocab.
I'm sure I stole that from someone.
It doesn't matter. I'm now stealing from you. So thank you for that. All right. So we have some questions. I'm going to go in. There is this person, Remy, who I think that's how we pronounce his name, who is, I think, actually a lab parent, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And he asks very thoughtful questions. He posed some ahead of time, and I'm going to go with one of his. So let's say, and he put it in just now, how can progress in this area, meaning the area that you're talking about, excuse me, be best measured / tracked / managed so that we are all going in the right direction together?
Oh, that is a big old question. I mean,
big old. Good thing you have 11 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to be clear, I'm very interested from the scientific standpoint about the impact of belief and expectations on human behavior. So I'm going to focus on the individual level, because I've often wondered, why is it when, we speak to all these parents that they all sort of desire the same thing at some level? And what prevents going to the next step of actuating it and, whether it be at the poll or with employers, into a reality? So we're actually investigating how sort of current policy landscapes impact how people feel, what their expectations are, and some really interesting early findings. And Angela, you'll find this interesting. My colleague Julie, who's an economist, we found in our data that when people think about a low resourced environment, low policy supports for parents and their parents themselves, you skyrocket their stress levels, right? Which is not surprising. And you decrease their mastery, so their ability to sort of move forward. And I often think, because we're in a country that has so little supports for parents, have we in some ways paralyzed them from moving forward because they have so little expectations? So we're doing research in terms of that. I mean, in terms of the broader, landscape of I just would, let's see what policies move. Let's see how businesses move in terms of family-friendly policies. I think these next few years will be super interesting. I think we need some wins for supporting family-friendly policies and for parents to start viewing themselves as an important block that deserves support.
The good question here from Thomas Santo. He's asking, coming from elementary school administration, during the pandemic, community building was not always equitable. During remote learning, the quote, parent nation, unquote, became insular and took care of their own rather than the community. Segregation increased on a variety of levels. What is your perspective on addressing the parent nation on promoting equity within the community?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that the pandemic really sort of not just highlighted the faults in our country, but sort of it widened them, in fact. And it's, remember, parent nation is an ideal that values and supports the labor of love of all parents, right? We in our work on the ground level, we're having great intentionality of involving all parents from all different backgrounds to bring their voice and lived experience to what they imagine a society that really supports them looks like. And I think an intentionality, and I want to point out that when the AARP really pushed forward, well, it was really labor, but when you saw this transformation for the elderly, it was, it decreased the poverty rate by 70% in the elderly. So, pushing forward, whether you call it a parent nation or a family-friendly nation, it should hopefully disproportionately, positively impact those that are have the least in terms of support and for their children.
Lonnie, I wanted to interject.
Please.
There was actually a question that a psychologist that I was having lunch with recently said, I hate that expression, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a parent to raise a child. And I think there was this thought of, either it's parent or it's society. And I wondered if you had been at that lunch and you had heard that, what would you have said next?
Thank you for that.
So is that to me?
Yeah. Oh,
actually,
yes.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was
She's
Solani.
fascinated by what I would say, but let's go with you, Dana. Yeah.
I'll go with you tonight.
I think it's exactly true. I mean, the health and well-being of children depends on the support for their parents. And so when we say a parent nation, and probably at some level that's the village idea, is that we need to better support parents in the role that is singularly theirs. It's not to say that grandparents and all of the people who love children and around them aren't important in their development, but it is the parent's role. And so in some ways, going, why did I name this book Parent Nation rather than Brain Trust? I mean, Angela, the title of books are important, for better or for worse.
Turns out, yes.
Yeah, I know. My first book, 30 million words. Did I actually mean it was like 30 million words? No, it was a homage to the study that inspired me, but people took it in a very concrete way. So I was like, as I thought about this next book, what would I want manifested? And at the end, I didn't call it Child Nation. I didn't call it Child Brain or Brain Trust. I called it Parent Nation, because at the end of the day, the health and well-being of children, as I said, is about the support for their parents. So I agree, look, things take on, things get into our lingo and they don't mean what people often say they mean. But yeah, we need a parent nation because parents deserve support so they can parent the way they want to parent.
So if I hearing you correctly, it takes a village to support a family to raise a child. And so it's not either or, right? It's both and. That's great. Well, we should all have lunch together. Anyway, I wanted to interject that question.
Yeah,
lunch
absolutely.
We could make that happen. Let's just make that happen.
In Chicago, probably.
No, I'll come to Philly. Well, there are lots of
Welcome to Philly. I love Philly. I love great dining in Philly. Alexandra had asked, she had submitted this ahead of time later in this afternoon when she registered. She said, I'm interested in how you think we can more effectively advocate for parents to get the support we need. Do you have like a couple quick suggestions? What are 2 things that people might be able to do to begin this process looking at?
Yeah. No. Obviously, going to the website, parentnation.org, you'll see these parent villages, which are really, sort of our way of helping families. It's a 4-part curriculum that really takes you through the process of figuring out the things that you want to change in society, in your community, and help you, come together and find community and forge collective identity. But, even before that, I think that, I want people to start raising their expectations and start seeing themselves as parents. I want them to reframe the narrative. I want them to see themselves as the builders and the guardians of our country's future, because it's a very different calculus when you realize, wow, I am building this country. Why am I suffering so much? Why are they making it so hard? And then all of a sudden, when you're with your employer, and I think employers are actually shifting much quicker than our policymakers, you see, oh yeah, you know what? My support of you allows you to bring your whole self to work while also building the future employees that I'm going to have down the line. And I think I want people to start viewing themselves differently and seeing other parents as allies. So often, as I mentioned, we don't look at other people. We see you as a parent, but we don't see you as an ally. And start raising our voices together that, COVID-19 made it clear, none of us parent alone, and we need and deserve support. And start actively talking about it, vote in that way, right? Et cetera. We need to start shifting the narrative and the norms.
I'm curious, and we don't have time to explore it, but it does cross my mind, Angela, thinking about what Dana's work from a civics point of view, how that then, in terms of your work with Character Lab, how this kind of both modeling in the home, modeling within a community, within a school, et cetera, how that then flows into the work that Character Lab has been so great at looking at with so many researchers over the years. I don't know if you have anything quick off the top of your head to mention about that.
Well, I'll just underscore what Dana said. I don't think it's ever too late for any parent. You don't say, gasp, my child's already 12, it's too late, or gasp, they're already 16. And Character Lab is a nonprofit that especially helps parents of adolescents figure out, what to say and do so that their children can thrive socially, emotionally, academically, and physically. And I think what Dana is saying is entirely backed by science, is that there is this early investment that we really hope every child gets. And it's complemented actually by later investment. And so it's not, again, an either or game. Parenting is, as I think is intuitive, I hope, to most parents. It doesn't seem to be as intuitive as it should be to policymakers, that we both need to invest early and also continue to invest and love and care for and challenge kids as they grow up too. And that makes me feel good, because it means I wasn't too late in specializing in teenage development.
Okay, beautiful. And we're at 7:59. So Dana, would you like to close out our time together here? Any last messages for all the viewers, and give them a hint about what we can do at after hours when you can have some fun and people can ask their own
dive
questions?
into all the things that we're doing on the ground. But you know what I say? Keep hope alive. I really, even though sometimes it feels like we're a little bit stuck, I really believe that great change can come to benefit, children and families in this country. And don't give up, because together we can make it a better world. So.
Oh, thank you so much, Angela. Thank you as always. We can't wait to see you in 3D in Chicago at some point.
I'll bring my book to get signed.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm going to come I'm coming to Philly. John and I are coming to Philly.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.